students of class 12. Today we will learn about fiscal deficit of government budget. In earlier classes we had explained government budget is a financial statement regarding total expenditure and total government receipts. When we are to calculate fiscal deficit, actually government is always focusing its fiscal deficit to reflect its dependence on borrowings. Fiscal deficit actually represents total borrowings of the government. Excessive borrowing implies financial irresponsibility of the government. So fiscal deficit actually indicating the dependence of a government on its borrowings. When we calculate fiscal deficit, we first consider total expenditure both in capital account and revenue account. And also we calculate total receipts excluding borrowing. That means in time of calculation of total receipts, we are considering total receipts in revenue account, total receipts in capital account, only excluding borrowings. Borrowings is not taken into consideration in time of estimation of fiscal deficit, because we want to see that borrowing through fiscal deficit. So I repeat, fiscal deficit is in short total expenditure of government both in revenue account and capital account minus total receipts excluding borrowings. Borrowings will not be taken into consideration in time of calculating total receipts of the government. This is the idea about fiscal deficit. Now take an example. Here we have represented a simple model of government budget. In left hand side, various government receipts being mentioned, and in right hand side, different government expenditures are mentioned. One thing you must take into consideration, that total government receipts reflected here 260 crores and total government expenditure reflected here 280 crores. So expenditure is more, 280 is the expenditure which is more than total receipts 260. If government expenditure is more than the total government receipts, that budget is called a deficit budget. So this simple model of government budget reflecting a deficit budget. What is that deficit? 280 minus 260, 20 crores is the deficit. Now, see the items within receipt sides. First, within government receipts, we will first consider the revenue receipts. Number one, tax receipts 100 crores. Number two, non-tax receipts 60 crores. These tax receipts or non-tax receipts are not affecting on assets and liability condition of the government. Because of collection of taxes, government liability or asset condition is not at all affected. This is why these receipts are within revenue receipts. Now consider the capital receipts. Capital receipt number one, borrowings. Number two, disinvestment. Borrowings increases liability, and disinvestment means you are selling the shares so your financial assets are declining. So these receipts are affecting on asset liability condition of the government. Liability increases due to borrowing, asset falls because of disinvestment. Because these receipts are affecting government asset liability conditions, these are within the headings of capital receipts. And taking into account both revenue receipt and capital receipt, total receipts 260. Now see the government expenditures, again classified into two, revenue expenditure and capital expenditure. First item in revenue expenditure, salary to government staff. Government expenditure to make payment of salary to its staff is not affecting asset liability condition. Subsidies given to the small producers never affects asset liability condition. Interest payment. If you are to take loan, you have to pay the interest. But this interest payment is not reducing your liability. If you pay some part of the principal amount, that will reduce the liability. So interest payment is not making any effect on liability, as because these expenditures are not affecting asset liability condition. These expenditures, salary to government staff, subsidy, interest payment, within the headings of revenue expenditure. But if asset liability conditions are affected, that will be capital expenditure. Capital expenditure, repayment of loan, these expenditure reducing your liability, so it is capital receipt. Investment, you are purchasing shares, this expenditure increases your asset, financial assets are increasing with the increase in shares. So because these expenditures are affecting asset liability condition within capital expenditure. Total expenditure 280, expenditure is more than total receipts, it is a deficit budget. Now to calculate fiscal deficit, total expenditure which is 280, total receipts of the government 260, but we will exclude borrowings. What is borrowings? Borrowings is 20. So total receipts excluding borrowings 260 minus 20. So ultimately we are getting 280 minus 240. 40 is the fiscal deficit. 40 is the fiscal deficit of the government. I think it is clear now. Now, what is the implication of this fiscal deficit and how the government will cover up this deficit? This idea is very essential. Fiscal deficit means it is indicating your dependence on borrowings. To meet this extra expenditure, government should borrow. And if borrowings are excessive, then huge interest bill must be paid by the government. And in many a times, to pay that interest, government may have to borrow again. For the repayment of one loan, another loan is being taken. This is called debt trap. So fiscal deficit, if indicates excessive dependence on borrowings or financial irresponsibility of the government, then that may cause a debt trap for the government. It is a bad indication. It is financial irresponsibility of the government. And also, whenever you are spending more, your expenditure is increasing, always there is a possibility of inflationary condition in the economy. So these are the implications of fiscal deficit. Now, to cover this gap, this deficit, what are the ways? First ways, government should borrow. These borrowings may be within the internal sector, maybe from central bank of the country, or maybe from external sources. At the same time, these fiscal deficit can be reduced. either by reducing government expenditure. If development expenditures cannot be curtailed, revenue expenditures can be curtailed. If government recruits less, then automatically salary to the staff will be reduced. Government may not be able to give subsidies, amount of subsidies may be reduced. If loans taken are less, interest burden will be less. In this way, government will try to reduce its expenditure. Gap can be reduced either by reducing expenditure or by increasing receipts. So at the same time, to reduce that gap, government should try to increase its income, maybe by raising more taxes. Tax receipts, non-tax receipts may be raised as much as possible. So these are the ways, if there is fiscal deficit, government will tackle this condition, which is not at all good for the economy. Excessive dependence on borrowings cannot be good. So to come out of this situation, always there will be some efforts to reduce this fiscal deficit. This much today. Thank you all.